identity. I think there's one of the slides that says.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We'll just leave that in. Thank you. Thank you, man. All right. So on the way down to the lake, I asked some of the boys a very specific question that I kind of want to ask all of you guys tonight. And I think it goes great with this song. It's wonderful how this song was picked out because I love the lyrics. So the question it was on my heart that I wanted to ask them that kind of goes in line with the theme tonight is, who are you? Who are you? Does anybody, you know what they said? First thing the boys said? They said their name. I said, okay, that's your name, I get that. But who are you? What other words would you use to describe who you are? I see a hand over here. Okay, child of God, I like that one. I'm a child of God. That's wonderful. A person who loves their dad. Great, I never even thought about that response. That's wonderful. That's good. I'll do one more. A person that loves their family. Okay. We'll do John first. Made in God's image. Excellent. Great choice.
A sheep.
A sheep.
You're part of God's family.
Excellent. Good word picture. All right. So I was thinking of this, who are you? Now, I bet if I asked a lot of people that are not at this camp, you know what they would say? I'm going to think back to high school for a moment. I'd say, well, maybe I'm the captain of the cheerleading team. Or I'm the star football player. Or I'm the smartest kid in my school.
4.0 GPA.
I'm just making up what people would say. I'm the tallest kid. I'm the strongest. I'm the smartest. But when we kind of think about who we are, a lot of times I think we're tempted to define that in a very performance-based. It's like what we do or what we look like. I'm one of the popular, best-looking girls in my high school. Whatever. I don't know. But that's kind of...
No.
I'm not saying me.
Okay.
But a lot of times, I think it really depends. Who are we is really defined sometimes by what other people think of us. But what other people think of us changes over time. It's not always the same. But there is one person's opinion that never changes. Who is that? Whose opinion of us never changes?
Jesus.
Our Heavenly Father's. Right. And that's why I loved a lot of your examples that you had brought up as a child of God. We are beloved. We are a child. We've been adopted. I was thinking from the past couple of nights, I brought two, I wish I had like a bathrobe. Have you guys know what a bathrobe is? I wanted a white bathrobe. But I was thinking as an example, oh boy, I'm really making that thing dirty. All right, imagine, let me put this down for a second.
Don't go to sleep on us.
All right, so imagine before we become Christians, we have this garment, like imagine this bathrobe, or maybe it's a towel. This is not a good color. I'd rather pick the color red. Red is like sin. It's ugly. It's dirty. We're guilty before God. We've sinned before God. We're kind of wearing this cloak. Do you remember last night I showed you a picture up on the screen of a sheep pen and Jesus is the gate? And in order to go through Jesus, you have to surrender everything. You have to give him your life. Remember, in order to climb up into the carriage where the king and the queen were riding, if you want to be adopted, what did the poor children over in India have to do? They had to, leave everything behind. So, here's what we do when we come to Christ. He is willing to take our robe of sin. Imagine this is like red. All right? We give it to Jesus. He puts it on his shoulders and he pays for our sin on the cross. The sin that we committed, he's innocent, we're guilty. He pays for it on the cross, our sin. And then what does Jesus give us in return? Remember, we give Jesus our life, he gives us his life. But what do you think, what kind of robe is Jesus wearing? What color do you think it is? Right. So, that's it. So, when we exchange robes with Jesus, he takes our sin and he gives us a perfect white robe of righteousness. It's perfect. Now, here's the key. We can get into heaven not because of our old... If you're wearing your old robe, you'll never make it in. Because you have to have a perfect robe. Perfectly white. I mean, brighter than any white you've ever seen. Brighter than the sun. But if we've traded robes with Jesus and we are wearing his robe, when God the Father looks at us, does he see our sin? No. He sees the perfection of Jesus on us. So we're wearing the robe of Jesus. So when God looks at us, he sees Jesus in us. He doesn't see us. He sees Jesus in us. He sees the perfection of Christ. So that's a good illustration for what we were talking about the last couple of nights. Now, I want to talk about tonight. Let me read a passage of scripture. This is in Psalm 139. You guys want to turn to that? Those of you who have some Bibles tonight. Psalm 139. I want to read a couple verses about just how special you are and how God has made you to be. You have a special role to play. You've been handcrafted. You have a specific purpose in this life. You have value. You are loved.
129.
All right. I'm going to read Psalm 139, so it's about in the middle of the Bible. Psalm 139, starting in verse 13. It's only a couple verses. If you don't have your Bible, you can listen carefully. I'm going to read a couple verses that King David wrote. Here's what he said, starting in verse 13. Psalm 139, verse 13. For you created my innermost being. You knit. Have any of you girls do knitting? With I don't know, what do you make with Afghans, scarves, hats? Crochet. That's about the same thing. That's good. Yeah. You knit me together in my mother's womb. That's where the baby grows. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you. When I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body, and all the days were ordained for me and written in your book. That means that before God ever even made you, he knew exactly how long you were going to live and exactly what he was going to create you for. All right? God ordained all your days before he even created you. Now, think about, I want you to do another exercise with me, and you guys can yell out, okay? Since King David wrote that, let's think about King David's identity. Let's think about, who are you? If we were to ask King David who he was when he was just born, let's say when he's 3 years old, what would he say?
David.
What do you think he would say?
David.
I'm David. How many brothers did David have?
12.
Anybody know?
7.
Do you know? No, not 12.
7.
He was the youngest of
7.
8 brothers. All right? He would probably say, I'm the youngest of 8 brothers. I got at least 2 sisters. I'm the youngest. Now, when David's about 10, what was he doing out in the fields? Watching sheep. So if we would have asked David, hey David, who are you? What would he have said when he was 10? I'm a shepherd. Right. Now, do you remember when the prophet Samuel came to David and he anointed David? He said, you're going to be the next king of Israel. If we would have asked David the next day, hey David, who are you? What would he have said? I'm going to be the next king of Israel. I'm the next king of Israel. That was his new identity. Then, a year from then, remember what happened with David with the sling and Goliath? David became a giant killer. So if we asked David, what's your identity? Who are you? He would have said, I'm a giant killer. All right? And then he became a famous commander of 1,000 men in King Saul's army. And then he became an outlaw as he was hunted down and King Saul tried to kill him because he was jealous. And eventually David became what? The king of... He reigned in Jerusalem, of Israel, the king of Israel. David became a king. Now, I don't know if any of you, I really honestly want a show of hands, but don't lie. In Ezekiel chapter 34 and Ezekiel 37, it says that one day King David will be raised from the dead. And when Jesus returns, when he comes back to the earth, Jesus will be the king over the entire earth. And King David will be raised from the dead, and he will one day sit on the throne as king of all of Israel. Jesus will be the king of the whole earth. David will be resurrected from the dead to be king for 1,000 years over the tribe of Israel. And remember the 12 disciples? Each one of the 12 disciples will be a judge over one of the tribes. That's what the Bible says. All right? So your purpose is not just even in this life. It extends even to when Jesus returns. Actually, this life is just practice for when Jesus comes back for 1,000 years. What are you going to do in the kingdom? What did God make you to do? How are you special? How are you valuable? When I look at Miss Beth, you know how she has such a gift for worship, and she loves campers. Think about how many campers how many lives she has changed over many, many years. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of campers. That's her gifting. She loves worship. She's great with music. She can play multiple instruments. Think about Pastor Wayne. He can work on projects with his hands. He can build churches. Who are you? What did God create you to do? What is your identity? What does the Father say that's never going to change? Now, I got one more passage. Those of you who have a Bible, turn to Judges chapter 6. We're going to just briefly look at Gideon. Judges chapter 6. I don't know what they teach in school because we homeschool our kids, so I want you to see if you can guess this. As you're turning to Judges chapter 6, guess this person that I have in mind. This boy was born in a one-room log cabin. And before he was a teenager, his family moved multiple times to different states. They moved all around. When he was 9 years old, his mom died. And his sister, who was just 11, she was 2 years older, she raised him. 10 years later, his sister died. Yep. And he was raised by his stepmother. He only went to school for 2 years of his life. He had to teach himself math, how to read, and to write. He worked long hours on a farm. Long hours on a farm. Now, when he was old enough, and you know they got married very young back then. This was a while ago. The first girl that he was interested in, before they could get married, guess what happened? She died. And he got really, really discouraged. Then he was interested in another girl, but right at the engagement, when they were engaged, getting ready, she said, "No, I don't think you're the one," and she left him. Right. Finally, he married a third girl, and 3 of the 4 children that they had died when they were really young. And for the next years and years, just nothing but defeat and loss and failure. But eventually, at I think 52 years of age, in 1860, who became president of the United States? Abraham Lincoln. He was born, think about this, he was a nobody. He was just a farmer. He couldn't even read and write. And yet, God had a plan and purpose for his life. If God can use a shepherd boy like David, or somebody like Abraham Lincoln, who was just a farmer, a regular, normal, he can use you, and he can use me, and he can use anyone here. He's looking for somebody to use. All right, look at Judges chapter 6. A couple things about Gideon. So the people of Israel, they had been so disobedient. God had done so many good things for them, and yet they refused to follow God. They refused to obey God. And God said, "Okay, you don't want to listen to me? Fine. I'm not going to protect you any longer." And God took his hands off of the country, and guess what happened? All of these enemy armies came in and began to steal their chickens, their corn. I mean, everything they planted, they were just hundreds of thousands. I'm talking, if there was every single foot of this entire property, which has been filled with people, all the way down past the lake, all the way up to the hill, just hundreds of thousands would come in, these soldiers, and they would take everything. And they did this for years and years. Finally, Israel said, "We're sorry. We should have obeyed you. We're sorry. Forgive us. Help us, God, please." And you know what God did? He showed up one day. He came to this guy named Gideon, who was just a regular, normal guy. He's a farmer. And when the Lord showed up, he said this, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." So the first thing he did is he gave Gideon a new identity. A new identity. You're not just a farmer, you're a mighty warrior. "Pardon me," Gideon said, "if the Lord's with us, why has all these bad things happened to us? Where are all the miracles we've read about in the past?" And the Lord turned to him and said, "You go in the strength that you have and save Israel out of the enemy's hands. I am sending you." So not only was Gideon given a new identity of who he is, he's a child of God. He's a mighty warrior. He's not a farmer any longer. He's a mighty warrior. And God says, "I am sending you to go and save others." And that's kind of the same for us today. If we've given our lives to Christ, we have a new identity. We're a child of God. We're a prince or a princess in his kingdom. And we have a new calling. We have a new mission. We're to go out and help God to rescue others, deliver others from darkness, to save others. And Gideon said, "How can I save anyone? I'm the weakest tribe. I come from the weakest clan. And my family is the least, the smallest in all of Israel." And the Lord answered and said this, "I will be with you. I will be with you. And you will go and strike down all the enemies, leaving none alive." So God gave him a new identity. He gave him a special purpose. And then he gave an amazing promise. He said, "I'll be with you. You'll be successful in life because I'm with you. I will give you the power. I'll help you accomplish the mission that I'm calling you to do." And Gideon still didn't believe, and he said, I'm sorry, but I need to ask, can you show me a sign? Can you show me some miracles to prove that what you said is going to come to pass?" And God was gracious enough to give Gideon 3 miracles to give him confidence in his new identity, his special purpose, and this amazing promise that God gave him. He says, "I will be with you." Now, the last thing in order to be successful, and I'll bring this to a close. The Lord said, if I'm going to use you, now this is important for you guys. If I'm going to use you, you've got to be pure. You've got to separate from all evil, all sin. You've got to be pure, and you have to be willing to do exactly what I tell you when I tell you to do it. Now, I want to imagine for a moment, I put you up at the shepherd's fold, and I told you, overnight, somebody came and hid grenades, explosive grenades, all over the field in random spots, all the way down to the lake. And I said, okay, you guys have to get down to the lake. And you know what would be the cost if you made a mistake? Your leg or foot, right? So, here's why obedience to God is so important. Because God knows where all the traps of the enemy are. God knows if we would just follow his footsteps and do exactly what he tells us, he can navigate us through the field of grenades. So sometimes that doesn't make much sense because he might say, well, take 3 steps forward. All right, now take 2 steps to the side. Now take 8 steps backwards. And you're thinking, backwards? Why am I going backwards? I'm trying to get down this way, but he's having me go this way. And then we have to do 8 steps back. Now 1 step over to the left. Now 10 steps forward, But God knows what you don't know. He's stronger than you. He's faster than you. He's wiser than you. He's outside of time. He can see the future. We've got to trust him and obey. Got to trust him and obey. So he told Gideon, if I'm going to use you, I've given you a new identity, a new purpose, an amazing promise. I've given you 3 miraculous signs to prove that all of this is real, but you've got to get rid of all the idols in your life. You've got to be pure. You have to obey me and do exactly what I tell you. And how many of you know the story? How many men did Gideon use to save Israel? 300, right? 300 versus 150,000. That's like calling Raina up small, and she has to beat all of you guys against one person. Like, that's impossible. Right? That's exactly God's purpose. It's like, it's impossible to do in your strength. That's why God's going to get the credit. And God got the credit in Gideon's life. There's one final verse. It's in 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 8. This is what I'm going to end with. God is looking. He's looking. I'm kind of looking at each one of you too. God is looking just for one person. He's looking for people who are willing, who have hearts that are committed to him. 2 Chronicles 16:8 says, the eyes of God look all through the earth. There's 8 billion people. He's looking all through the earth. He's looking at every single person's heart. And he's hoping to find one person whose heart is fully committed to him that he can use in a miraculous, special way. The question is, are you willing to be used? So God's eyes are ranging all throughout the earth. He's just looking for someone. You could be like Abraham Lincoln. He grew up in a one bedroom, one room log cabin. Or David, he was a shepherd. Nobody thought David was going to be anything at all, but God was looking, and God saw David's heart and said, that's somebody I can use. That's somebody who's pure. He's going to obey me. I can raise him up to be a king. Do you remember Joseph in the Bible? Joseph was a nobody, and he got raised up to be the second most powerful man on the face of the earth under Pharaoh. So right now, guys, I was in school. I was the state champion in wrestling. I went to college for wrestling. They paid my way. I went in the military. I did many great things. I only got 1 B in my entire college career. And I've been in school for many, many years. But all of that stuff is meaningless. It doesn't end. All the trophies, they've been thrown away. I mean, baseball, soccer. I did everything. They're all gone. I'm old now. What does it matter? Why don't we live for something that lasts forever? God has a special purpose. God, you are valuable. He's looking, his eyes are looking just for one person that he can use in a miraculous way to change history, to change the world, not only in this world, but even in the world to come. Are you that type of person? Can he use you? He's looking for hands, he's looking for feet, he's looking for somebody who's just empty, totally surrendered to him, so he can fill and use your body for his glory and his kingdom. So here's the prayer tonight, and I don't expect hardly any of you guys to stand up. This is very serious. And I don't want you to stand up, because if you stand up and your heart's not in it, that's going to bring consequences. Okay? So, this has got to be from the sincerity of your heart. What I felt led tonight is, all of you guys, look at this verse. We're supposed to find our worth and our identity in only what God says is true of us. That's for all of us. But God's eyes are looking. It doesn't matter how old you are. Moses was 80 before he was really used by God. It doesn't matter if you're old, if you're young. God's looking for people who would totally surrender to him, that he can use in a miraculous way to change the world forever. If God's speaking to your heart tonight, and you're willing to be one of those people, to lay your life down, that he would use you, just like he did Gideon, I'm going to ask you to stand, okay? Because I want to pray for you. Now, I'm not telling everybody to stand. This is very serious. You're giving your life to God, for God to use you in a very powerful way to make a difference in this world. If you're willing to stand for that, then I want you to stand right now, and I'm going to pray and close this out, okay? Would anybody be willing to fully commit? Your heart's got to be fully committed to the Lord. Says, I don't know what that is. I don't know yet. It might be really young. It might be 10. You might be a teenager. But I really feel like God's calling me to something, and I want to offer him my whole life. God, use my life for your glory. Use my life for your kingdom. If that's you, if you really feel, I want you to stand. Doesn't matter how old you are. Doesn't need